Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to see you all here in this lovely weather. Would like to apologize for the late start, but we know that you're going to have an excellent session this morning. So before we do anything else, I'd like to invite Ms. Roxanne John to bring the Lord in our presence.
Let us all stand. Almighty Father and God, we indeed want to give you thanks for being who you are, the God of love and mercies, and helping us to be here this morning as we culminate the week of activities for the public service. We want to give you thanks, Lord, despite the weather, we can be here, and we ask, oh God, for a special blessing. As we discuss, Father, how we can accelerate innovation in public service delivery, we ask, oh God, that we be with everyone that will present, with those on the panels, and be with us who will listen and participate. I pray, Lord, that we continue to direct our paths, direct our thoughts, so at the end when we leave here, that we will be better people fit into the service for you. We ask that a blessing may be upon the public servants, those of us, Lord, who have called to do your work, that we will do it to the best of our ability. Pray for our leader, pray for the Prime Minister, and for our country on a whole. For our listening public, we ask, oh God, and we bless all of us, the media, and everyone who will participate today. Direct us and help, Lord, that your special blessing will continue to remain with us. These are mercies we humbly ask in Jesus' name.
Thank you very much. I'll now invite Ms. Nayuka Ashton. She would lead us with the national anthem.
Saint Vincent, land so beautiful, with joyful hearts we pledge to thee our loyalty and love, and vow to keep you ever free. Whatever the future brings, our faith will see us through. May peace reign from shore to shore, and God bless and keep us true. High rule now fair and blessed eyes, your mountains high so clear and green are home to me. Though I may stray, our heaven come serene. Whatever the future brings, our faith will see us through. May peace reign from shore to shore, and God bless and keep us true. Our little sister islands are those gems, the lovely grenadines upon their seas, and golden sands, the sunshine ever beams. faith will see us through. May peace reign from shore to shore, and God bless and keep us true.
Thank you. Dr. the Honorable Ralph Gonzalez, Mrs. Corinne Gonzalez, heads of departments, distinguished members of the panel, fellow public servants, members of the media, special invitees and other invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, once again, good morning. I would like to welcome everybody to our first ever public service forum panel discussion. And I would like to wish you also a happy Public Service Day, which happens to be today, the 23rd of June, which is celebrated every year as stipulated by the United Nations. Okay? Before I go on, I will now take this opportunity to invite the Prime Minister, Dr. the Honorable Ralph Gonzalez, to bring you remarks on behalf of the public service as Minister of the Public Service.
Madam Chairperson, the public servants and specially invited guests and those who are following us on the public media. I want first of all to commend and congratulate all public servants, the nurses and the doctors, the health workers, the police, the teachers, the civil servants, on the work you have been doing for the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I want to thank you, I want to commend you, and I want to say that the nation is very grateful for all your efforts in delivering good service, good public service to the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And the pledge contained in your theme for today about innovation to improve service delivery and to have that innovation customer-centered or people-centered. Implied in that is that, look, we're doing well, we're doing good, but we could do better. And I want to thank you, commend you for your good work, and also for the quest to improve through innovation and customer focus, client focus, people focus. And today being World Public Service Day, it is an appropriate day for me as the Prime Minister to make both the declaration in respect of commending you and also to join you in the quest for improved delivery in the public service, which I suspect is what the panel discussion and all your activities are about. Now, anybody, a group of persons as large as the public service, you're going to have an unevenness in the delivery of the public service. And the unevenness will come from the different sets of factors. They relate to systems and processes in particular departments or units, and the physical facilities in which you are housed, the equipment you have at your disposal, and of course very much depend on the level of training of the various individuals and their own personal commitment, and to human things such as your health and welfare, which could all affect delivery. Now, innovation is really about the practical application of novel ideas. That's what innovation is. If the idea is to communicate better and to move faster and to be able to store and retrieve information, clearly you need to have upgraded IT systems. So that's just one example. I mean, it's a practical application of novel ideas. And, you know, in preparation for the job that I have as Prime Minister, I don't know if I said this anywhere before publicly, but I made it my business to read every single biography or autobiography, or to read biographies or autobiographies about every Prime Minister from Walpole to Tony Blair, as it was, and to read what is happening in other countries. But one of the interesting things, little thing that I found, Gladstone, Ewart Gladstone, British Prime Minister at the turn of the 20th century, late 19th century. He was the last British Prime Minister to have seen every piece of correspondence that came to him. He read them. Britain was then 25 million people perhaps. It's now 65. And Britain, of course, was then in control of an empire. But William Ewart Gladstone didn't have to deal with emails. He didn't have to deal with the extent of the regional and global organizations. So it's not surprising that he himself, even before this, that every Prime Minister in the 20th century, after Gladstone, in the late 19th century, had other people sifting the correspondence. Because you had the telegraph came into being. Telegraph reduced the speed of sending an express mail from New York from 10 to 14 days to some minutes. And then of course the fax came a little later and reduced it by still a few more minutes. And then of course the internet came with a few seconds. Clearly in time-wise, the impact of the telegraph would have been more profound because you move from 10 days to 5 minutes, 7 minutes perhaps. But nevertheless, what we have seen now is the generation of the amount of information. And you have that problem. And how are you going to store your information? How are you going to retrieve it? How are you going to know what is important and what is not important? It's, and every day I'm sure you get a lot of junk. I certainly get a lot of junk. I mean, the number of people, Edmund will tell you this, as the acting Director General of Finance and Planning and the Budget Director, I will send them from time to time, not a note to Edmund and Morris, LOL, as Dave Cameron said, lots of love, laughing out loud. But I'd say another crazy proposal for billions. You'd have a fellow write you 20 pages, and they have 50 million to lend you. And they have the money in this account, and they send some report, 50 million US, and then they will tell you that in the smallest of the print, all you have to do is to give them a sovereign guarantee. You don't have to do nothing but a sovereign guarantee, because they're all, so you get a lot of junk. And the point I'm making is that you have to organize yourself to deal with the very innovation, which tells us that the practical application of novel ideas is not just only in technology, but to deal with the greatest computer, your brain, which means you have to train that properly. That's why we invest so much money in training. And you can't work well unless you're healthy. It's a fact of life. So when we are talking about all sorts of things, we must remember all these human dimensions. And we have to remember our family life, because that helps. You can't have a man who nagging you every morning before you come to work and harassing you about all sorts of foolishness, and still you come in and properly do work at the office of the Prime Minister or with Edmund Jackson as Budget Director. I use men nagging because the usual thing is that people say that women do the nagging, which is, I want to just turn it upside down. So it's a multiplicity of factors. Now, our country is too small for us to have workplaces, and our public service too small for us to have our workplaces degenerate into essentially war zones. And we can send an email in seconds. And as human beings, we send men to the moon. But some public servants don't even want to talk to the person next to them. Yeah? So, a very innovative idea in that respect is to have a little courtesy for your colleague. I want all of us to see the gamut of things. And then we have to understand the people whom we serve in. Vincentians, broadly speaking, are very good-natured. And most of them who come to our offices are good-natured. And even some of them who behave badly, disrespectfully, it's not that they're not good-natured, but they believe that that is where they have to behave to you in order to get your attention. Some of us are naturally irascible and at war with the world, but you have to be able to figure those things out yourself. And And if somebody comes to you being very disrespectful and so on, it's always helpful to be charming and courteous and yourself being firm and respectful. Do yourself, don't degenerate to their own level if they go there. And broadly speaking, just few of them, proportionately. But if you're not having a good morning at home, and the first thing is somebody can tell you something which is very unreasonable and in a rude manner, you're on the top of your lip, you tell him, listen, not this morning. I can't take you this morning with this thing. You have to try and avoid that. So they're little things, and you know it as well as I do, you know. In short, we develop our skills. We just be good to people as we'd like them to be to us. And we know that as public servants, you have to appreciate that this country provides a lot of resources to keep the public service going. The taxes which we collect, 60 cents out of every dollar go towards paying salaries and retirement benefits. 60 cents out of every dollar. And of course, you want more. It's understandable. But we can't all want more because somebody had to feed the cow. You can't want more milk and don't feed the cow. And if you don't feed the cow, somebody else has to feed the cow. And if the cow is not fed, the cow would stop giving milk. And so anything we do, we have to make it sustainable. And we always have to remember that difficult as may be the economic circumstances of many civil servants, people who sustain us are many of them, in fact most of them, are in a situation not as good as us. So we must bear that in mind too. So we are grateful for what they are doing for us. And we must realize that. As much as the public have gratitude, which I expressed earlier, for the tremendous work that you do to deliver service to them. There are several matters may come up in the public service this week. And one of them would be how do we reform public servants' pensions? We need to have a sensible conversation on this. I happen to know that it is political dynamite because people always going to want to protect every single dollar of their existing pension arrangements from now until eternity. We are one of the few countries remaining in the Caribbean. There are several countries which have removed this pension by the state, non-contributory, and a contributory one through the National Insurance Services. And the actuarial studies have shown, and I asked Ed Morris and Edmund to show all the public servants the numbers. By 2025-27, by and large, most public servants are on target to receive more money when they retire as a pension as they get as a salary. That's not so far away, you know. Some studies, Edmund, show 2030. The employer would have contributed to the contributory pension, and the employer would have contributed wholly to the non-contributory pension. There are various models to protect and preserve pensions at a level which is acceptable, but which is sustainable, because it cannot be sustainable for one to have a pension in excess of your salary or in excess of the holder of that post, because somebody has to pay for it. And common sense will tell you that that is not sustainable. And if we don't address it sensibly, the system will crash. That is the simple fact of life. That's the arithmetic. Now, there are different ways in which we could address it. Several years ago, as you know, the previous administration has run up to 1992. If you're employed after 1992, you only had an NIS pension to get. That was changed in 2000 when the amendment took place to that provision in the general protest against the parliamentarians then, the government ministers then, increasing their pensions or seeking to increase their pensions, and there were protests, and we know the history of that, where it led to. And in order to placate the public servants, the then government simply gave in and said, okay, is that what you want? You have it. And leave it there for future governments to tackle. Now, a law can be passed easily to say, look, after the year 2017, nobody is going to get, if you join the public service after January 2017, nobody is going to get other than the NIS pension. And those of you who are there, you say, well, you're satisfied. And the new persons who come, they will just have the NIS pension. But it is possible for us not to do it that way, and to do it in a manner where we can all have an acceptable level which is sustainable, and use average historical standards, Edmund, use comparative data elsewhere to arrive at different models. And there have been studies and all of this. I really want to see if I can lead the conversation on this. Now, I could take the view that I make up my mind I'm going to leave before 2020 as Prime Minister, and whoever else is coming to do it, that's their headache. I go up gas and cool out Why should I take on this problem? You know what I mean? But I can't do that. I'd be irresponsible. And everybody is telling you that you can have this going on in perpetuity. You know you can't have it. I know it. The question is this, is whether we are going to allow some people to lead us unreasonably by the nose, or whether we're going to use the best computer ever devised, our brains, and look at things rationally. And remember the analogy which I gave. Somebody has to feed the cow. You can't just milk it and milk it dry and it not be fed. I hope I live to 100, but I wouldn't like the pension which I will get for this pension not to be paid at all. I have an interest to it, though the parliamentarian's pension is organized differently than the public service pension. I believe if you were to look proportionately, given the length of time that I have served, proportionately as the amount of the salary that I will get, I don't know, I haven't done the calculation, but I don't suspect it would be advantageous proportionately over what other persons are getting, given the long time that I've been around. I've been around almost as long as Nehemiah. But I wouldn't want one day a future Edmund Jackson to be on radio to tell me that this is the last month I'm getting my pension. I have to take a reduced one. Everybody had to take one by 50% by force because there's no payment for it. By edict, and could Heavenly Father, what is going to happen? We'll have chaos. We will have, the place would mash up. There will be tumult, but it would be senseless tumult, because if it's not there, nobody can get anything more. So I just want to, while we are celebrating, I want us to put this on in the mix. I don't want in this week I certainly don't want to itemize how the good fortune that we have. I just want us to be thankful for what we have and to see how sensibly we can best retain what we have on a basis that is sustainable. Never forget those words, on a basis that is sustainable. Before I leave, I want to use this medium to thank God for the long life of Tanti V up in Trigger Ridge, who is 100 years today. Viola Cumberbatch. And I want you to excuse me. I will try and listen to the tape, to the discussion. I have to go and break bread with Tanti V. You know how it is, if you're 100, it'd be good to see if Ralph comes by now. So I think she would appreciate me more than you would appreciate me. So I would like you to release me to go and do that. And I wish you all the best. And I want you to know that I am not interested in us, in the public service, being in a war zone. I'm too old for that. I want us to sit down rationally and discuss all our problems and difficulties and come to sensible solutions in the interest of the public service and in the interest of the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And congrats again, and thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for the work you've been doing. I want to tell you this. When I turn up at 7:30 in the morning to work, almost every single one of my staff at the office of the Prime Minister is in place. It's incredible. And Edmund will know sometimes he comes over, we have a meeting late. I will tell the staff there, I say, you don't have husbands or boyfriends? I say, why are you hanging around here so late? 7:30, 8 o'clock. They're still around with me working. I don't ask them to. But we're in a very good work environment, and they enjoy clearly doing the work that they do. And I said the husbands, ask them if they don't have husbands or boyfriends, because upstairs there are only 2 men work up there. Apparently they discriminate against men when it comes to the office of the Prime Minister. And I don't know if the Public Service Commission, the CPO's office deliberately does it, but it's, there are only two, you know, 2 men. Everybody else is a woman. Of course, I love it. I'm not complaining, but and they do excellent work, and I especially want to thank them and those in the Ministry of Finance, in the Ministry of National Security, Public Service, all those, the portfolios which I hold. I want to thank them especially today. God bless you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you. Yes, you can. Okay. You would notice next on your program, but before I bring up our bright spot, I just want to thank everybody again for being here and to notify everyone that we are on air on NBC Radio 705, and we are also streaming this event online on www.ITFXSVG.com. It's powered by ITFX Digital Solutions. ITFX Digital Solutions is responsible for the streaming. I want to thank both entities for being here this morning. So let's go straight into what we have you here. We have a phrase called bright spot. And I'm going to give you a Caribbean Leadership Program definition of what bright spot means. A bright spot is an example of a person or organization that demonstrates that which is going right. Not perfect, but right. It is based on the principle of appreciative inquiry, where the focus is on what there is to appreciate in that organization. In this case, the National Telecommunications Regulatory Commissions, as we know them as NTRC, is that organization chosen to inspire and set the tone for our panel discussion. At this point, we have Mr. Apollo Knights, who is the Managing Director at the NTRC. He will come and do the presentation. He has been the director since 2002, And prior to his current posting, he was the telecommunications officer in the Ministry of Communications and Works and was deeply involved in the telecommunications liberalization process within the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, OECS. He holds a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, a master's degree in telecommunications and networking, and an MBA in international business. And he will come and inspire us based on his organization. Please welcome Mr. Apollo Knights.
All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good, I think you can do a little better than that. Good morning. Good morning. That's better. No, it's not normally speaking after the Prime Minister, so hopefully you forgive me. Normally he speaks last, so I'll try my best to do something that measures up close to his normally well-informed and wise speeches. As you see, he was not reading from any papers. It's all in the head. So I'm not at that level as yet. I still have to follow the little notes here. So bear with me, please. All right, so Emma has chosen my organization to be the bright spot. I wasn't involved in it. I just accepted the request. I say I don't think we do everything right, but we try our best. And I guess she thinks some of the things we have been doing are okay. So we're going to speak a little on that on what we do. I see this presentation is a little awkward to me. I don't like to be one that brags about what we do. All right? I don't think that's good to do. So I prefer other persons speak about us. But today I have to speak about what we do. So I'll try my best. So from my view, we are a young organization. We've just been around since really November 2001. And we're constantly trying to do things better. So we, as a young organization, we have to learn as we go along. We try to do things better and improve as we go along. So we're always looking to see how things are done in other entities and see how we can apply some of those good practices at our place. And you try them, sometimes they don't work, and you change them. And that's the important thing of running an organization. You have to know when to change and adapt as you go along. Because the world is always changing, and the sector that we're involved with, telecommunications, IT, even changes faster than most things. So if we don't change, we won't be able to meet the needs of our stakeholders, and those are persons located both in St. Vincent as well as Caribbean region, and even internationally. So our stakeholders are wide. The theme for today's event is about accelerating innovation in public service delivery in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. In the past few years, innovation seems to be the buzzword of a number of organizations in every industry and even globally, every sector. From my view, it's not new. I think it's always been with us. The big difference now is that it can be done more easily and less costly, I think, to get things done, to change stuff. And that's mainly due, I believe, to technology developments over the last decade and a half. The technology shift, I will say, is that of the impact of software on a number of industries. Things that were previously done by hardware are now done via software. I think that is the big change that has occurred and what has led to a lot of innovation happening in a number of institutions. A little later in my presentation, I will give a definition of innovation. The PM in his presentation indicated, I think, that it's mainly about ideas, new ideas, and application of them. My presentation this morning, I'm going to cover 3 areas. I will first give a little background on the NTRC, what it is and what it does. Then I'll share a bit of how we apply innovation in some of the things we do in the organization. And finally, I'll give some recommendations on how I believe the public service could innovate more going forward. So the background on the NTRC, it's a statutory body established by the Telecom Act of 2001 to regulate the telecommunications sector in St. Vincent and Grenadines. It opens its doors November 2001. It has a board-like structure. We don't call them a board. There are 5 commissioners, so they have certain functions like a board. They run the organization, but they have one major difference in most boards. Most boards only make decisions that affect the company themselves. Our commissioners can make decisions that affect stakeholders outside the organization, such as the telecom companies regulate. So they can make decisions that affect flow, digital, etc. So they have some judicial powers in their functions. We are part of a wider regulatory system in the OECS. So we're in 5 countries. There are 4 other NTRCs in Grenada, St. Lucia, Dominica, and St. Kitts. And there's also a regional component called ECTEL, Eastern Caribbean Telecommunications Authority. They're based in St. Lucia. So there are 6 arms to us. A big difference with the NTRC, I think, compared to other statutory bodies in St. Vincent is that we don't receive annual subventions from the government. As some others, most do, I think, get some form of subvention to keep them going. So we are funded by a central pool of funds. It's a regional fund. It's controlled by ECTEL. But the money comes from the 5 countries. So we collect the money locally, and the funds mainly come from spectrum fees. Spectrum fees, to make it simple, is something you don't see. It's there. It's in the air, and I guess you use it like in your car. You tune into 1 or 2.7. That frequency you call spectrum, and we charge for it. So anyone who uses spectrum in St. Vincent pays a fee. We collect the fee, and it goes into a central pool, and that's what funds the 6 entities. And I'll go into some of our functions. There's a few of them, so you have an idea what we do. The telephone number you have, which you give everybody to get you at, that telephone number comes from us. So we're the ones who give it to the providers to give to you. So we have to manage that on a regional scale, and it comes from an international body that we deal with. As I mentioned, the frequency on the radio station that you tune in the radio, all those frequencies come from us, 99.9, 103.7. We're the ones who assign them, and we have to do that in a way that makes sure that when you listen to 102.7, you don't hear 99.9 at the same time. So there's a lot of science and background engineering in the background to make sure that don't happen. The planes you go to the Grenadines on, SVGA, those planes that you fly on, we license them. The telecommunication equipment in them, we're the one responsible for licensing them to make sure they're okay. A lot of planes a lot of ships that are registered on the St. Vincent flag, the telecommunication systems on those, we're also the one responsible for licensing them and make sure they're in order with international standards and regulations. Some of us, I guess, have flow phones, some are digital. When you call each other, and there are a lot of things that goes in the background, that call goes from one network to the next. There are a lot of agreements, big documents for that to happen between providers. We're the ones who have to approve that. When they negotiate it first, they agree on it, and if they don't agree, we have to intervene. So we get involved in that. Those are things happening in the background, persons don't know. But that was one of the biggest impediments when we opened the market in 2002 for the long delay before service came in, just doing those negotiations. Recently, when the AIA opened, the new airport, up to the day before it opened, we were working with them to make sure it had the right frequencies for them to operate and talk to the planes. They had to get new frequencies for the to operate at the international airport. We're the ones who have to assign those to them. And when you have emergencies at the sea, when a ship sinks, a boat sinks, or in distress, there's certain systems that give out certain signals, certain codes, like a telephone number. We're the ones who assign them as well for those ships and boats. For your telephone rates, some of them, your fixed line rates, the telephone rate you notice has not changed. For your fixed line phone over the last 5-6 years, there's a reason for that. It's a regulated rate. We control it. If you notice, the mobile rate has been changing a lot in the last few years. Those are not regulated. Right? So that's the reason. So some things we do, some we don't. Why the mobile ones are not regulated, it's a big question. And you should ask the ones in St. Lucia that Ectel is the one who are responsible for making that move. Right. We also handle complaints if you have a problem with your provider, which a lot of persons I think have problems with the internet service over the last year. But they mostly complain verbally on the radio or on social media. They don't want to file a formal complaint. But based on the current regulations we have in place, we can't intervene unless you do a formal complaint. So if you have the time, it's only one page, you can fill it out. For those who do the complaints, they normally get a redress. So if you want to try that out, you can try and see if it works. It has been working in the past. We also do a number of projects that impact our citizens, and they're under what we call a USF program, or a Universal Service Fund program. And if you go to any school in St. Vincent, private or public, the wireless internet that's in it is done by us. If you go to the community college as well, there are new programs there that are being offered. One in cybersecurity, associate degree. We're the ones who develop and work with the college and fund that program. There's also one in software development. That's also a partnership with them. So those are some of the things we do. Also in all the clinics, police stations, hospitals, the internet, Wi-Fi that's there, we're the ones who are responsible for maintaining it and put it there. So we do those kind of projects that in order for persons who have access to the internet and so forth. Another important thing we do, again, is persons will receive, I say, a lot of persons who have satellite dishes, maybe some persons, or even flow, they receive their signal from a satellite. Those satellites have to be coordinated, or you get interference with them. We're the ones who handle that. Whenever a new satellite is going up in our region, they have to deal with all the countries to make sure it doesn't do any interference to the existing ones there. So we deal with the International Telecommunications Union and those matters. So those are a few things we do, and a lot more. So just to give you an idea of what we do. But there are also some other things that we don't do, which a lot of persons think we should do. And for example, a lot of persons complain about the cable TV channels, that flow changes them, and these things, we don't have any control over that. That's content. Our act don't give us the authority to deal with those issues, so that's out of our control. Also on the radio stations, a lot of the songs, people might object to the quality and the lyrics and so forth. That's also out of our jurisdiction. In some countries, they have a broadcast commission. I handle those stuff. We don't have that one in St. Vincent and most of the OES islands, so that's things we don't handle. So while we do all those things, we're not a big organization. Some persons might think we're bigger than what we are. We just have 12 staff. So in comparison to the public service, that's maybe a very small department in the public service. I mean, in civil service, right? Because we're part of the public service. So we have 12 persons, and we're actually one of the bigger NTRCs in the region. Some have 8 and 7. So we have 12, and they complain when we're trying to get the money from the central pool that we have too much staff, too many staff, right? So, but we think there are a lot of needs to be met, and that's where we try to push the envelope. Right, so I'll move on now to innovation in our organization. Some things we have done over the last 15 years. So I'll look at the definition I got from Wikipedia. And one I think best captures my view on what innovation is. So I quote, "Innovation can be defined simple as a new idea, device, or method. However, innovation is often also viewed as the application of better solutions that meet new requirements, unarticulated needs, or existing market needs." I think that sums up my view of what innovation is. So I'll now spend a little time and give a few examples of where we have seen the need over the last 15 years in our organization to make changes, and how we did things and how we implemented new solutions. And the whole purpose of which was and is to make us more efficient. And the end result of being more efficient is always better service to the customer, both directly and indirectly. So if you can save time on one task, it frees up your staff to handle other tasks in a faster time. Result in faster response. This results in faster response to customer needs. So when we started the NTRC for a number of years, in terms of our internal collaboration, sending emails internally, we use what we call a Microsoft Exchange server. That's a computer in a room where they pay electricity cost for it, maintain the server, change it, the cost to it. A few years ago, we decided to move that to the cloud. So we subscribed to Microsoft Exchange online service. So to the user, it's the same service. However, we no longer have a computer in the office. You don't have to maintain it. It's less costly. When we came up with the idea to do it, our IT department was reluctant to do it. So we had to convince them, show them the cost-benefit analysis, the cost of doing it, that it'll free up the time to do other things, and they finally agreed. So that's one of the changes we made. For our board meetings, we used to do it in paper format. A lot of papers to do for every month. Big documents, we have to deliver them, drive wherever they are, deliver them to them. I showed the same with all other organizations. When iPads came out, they wanted iPads. I told them that if we are able to save some money, we'll be able to buy new iPads now. So we was not going to buy iPads to have it online, plus the paper stuff. So we quit the paper stuff. So that was the agreement. So we no longer do paper, no paper at our board meetings for the last 5 years. So everything is done online. And we use an app for that called Convene, right? The app is developed in Hong Kong, especially for board meetings. And since then, Ectel also uses it, and all the other NTRCs have moved to it. So that's a change we made. In terms of public surveys, we do public surveys from time to time. We go out in the field, get the feedback. Those are done in paper format. We now use what's called a SurveyMonkey. That's an online cloud-based solution as well, so we use that for some years now. In terms of networking and productivity tools, I mean MS Office, Microsoft Word, we all use those things. We still use those, so we haven't changed that as yet. I have been along with the IT staff still and keeping that in-house, but maybe in the future might shift to online one, but that's still the same. In terms of conducting meetings, before they were all in face-to-face, we have to travel, go overseas in meetings. We now use still in person, but we also use a software called Zoom. Right? It's you have a free version and a paid version, depending on how long length of time you want for the meeting. So we use it a lot for the other NTRs in Ectel when we have meetings and people from overseas, so that saves in cost as well. Send out emails when we have like big events. You want to send out a lot of emails, invitations to people. Before we did that using normal Outlook Express, a more manual process. We now use a service, online cloud-based service called MailChimp. We've been doing that for a few years now. Again, it's saving costs, more faster, less errors. When we have community events, we go out in the field. Before you want to do coverage, it was like a telephone link to the radio station to take it live from us, which was more or less a local, regional reach. Over the last few years, we started streaming. So we have a account with live stream. So we have our own little camera and we stream those events. So we reach a lot more people, and also those who are using Facebook stuff, well, online stuff. Plus to get wider reach in the diaspora as well. For the big events, we use ITFX, which I think is covering this one, but it's pretty expensive. So for the smaller ones, we use our own stuff. For the big ones, we use it here. For our voice communication, this is one that I guess a lot of organizations have changed already. Before we had the normal PBX analog phones, and we had it from 2001, and when IP phones came in, everybody wanted to IP, buy new IP phones, but we were like reluctant to that. So there were too much different vendors, and plus what it costs to spend for it and what we'll save. And we actually didn't change this until last year, went to IP. So maybe later than others, but that's when we saw the need to. And more or less because the old one was still working, the cost was good, but then we couldn't find spare phones when they go bad. So that was the main reason we changed over. Right. In terms of backing up our data, before all the backup was done on site and tapes and so forth. Since then, we have online backup, and not overseas, actually, well, locally, off-site. We actually use the fiber for the government service, and we back up back to using a server hosted by ITFXDS. So it's our server hosted at their location, but off-site. In terms of purchasing of goods, which is something, again, it's a balance again. We should purchase all goods locally, at least you put a lot of money back in the economy. But then you have to make a decision sometimes based on efficiency and productivity. We started running into issues of, for example, toner. Toner is finished, we can't get the toner locally. So if you can't get the toner, you can't print, you can't get documents out. So we had to make a decision. So like for toner, we buy our toner from Amazon now, and it takes a week or so, it gets here, so we all have toner running problems. So the local business lose out, but that's how it goes sometimes. So we try as best as we could locally, but a lot of stuff that we order from Amazon, we save costs and more efficient with something. We decide to support local stuff when we have to. Right. Now, all of these changes were possible because of one thing, which is broadband availability. You need the internet to use the online services. If you don't have the internet, you can't access them. So that's broadband availability is important. And back to the software issue. Software is now able to do a lot of things the hardware was able to do before. Right? So the other thing is driving innovation is the availability of broadband and software tools that are now making things more affordable to the small organizations. So like video conferences was around before, was very expensive. So a big organization could afford it, but smaller guys couldn't do it. But now Zoom, it's for free for some amount of time, and if you want to pay for the account, it's very affordable. Right, so that's a big change I think is happening. Now, all these other stuff I mentioned are externally produced software. So I don't want to give you the impression we only do external stuff. We also develop a lot of software in-house as well. In our early stages, when things were tight, we didn't have much money, we have a lot of in-house developed databases. So all our invoicing is done with our own application. All our pass-through letters are done by our own internal database system. Right. And we also believe deeply now that our country and a region can also produce software, as we've been doing, that can help us be more efficient in our tasks, but also create a new revenue stream for citizens. So software is big business, but our country and the region hasn't really been taken into it as yet as an area for development, and we think it's one area that we need to focus on. And so that's one of the main reasons we have done a number of initiatives over the last few years, which I'm going to go into now. So for example, we have a pilot program in secondary schools where we teach third formers to code. So we want to get them into the early stage of coding. Because from research done by CXT, coding is something like math. A lot of people don't like it for whatever reason. And they see a lot of persons who want to get in the programming part of it, but they say the world is going to software, and we have to be able to be software developers if we want to get into that area. We also have started a summer program called a My App Summer Program, which is 5 weeks long, and we got more into coding. That's for a person between the age groups of 13 to 18. We used to do one program per year. This year we're going to do 2. So we're going to go to the Grenadines this year as well, to Union Island. So expand it. We don't want to leave out the Grenadine Islands. And then we go at the higher level. Let's say we have the associate degree program at the Simmons and Grenadines Community College. And it's not just coding alone. The software, the associate degree program is a well-rounded program. It's more or less to develop entrepreneurs in software. You teach them business skills, design skills, so that they can start their own businesses or get employed by other places. And also we have what we call the Ice Quit competition, which is ideas and innovation. So I mean, same thing we talk about today. We started about 4 years ago, and if you look at the banner over there, it's a local called Ice Quit competition. Right. I'll come after the logo a little further in my speech. And the first 3 years of the competition was targeted to the public service. I know we have 0, but Let's give me a little few minutes there. Andrea, I show you a little bit of me, otherwise we won't get to the real meat of the matter. The ice cream competition, the first 3 years was targeted to developing ideas for the public service. Because we saw a need for the public service to be innovative, more innovative. So there are currently over 100 ideas that were developed by students to make the business processes in the public service more innovative and more easier. And we created an online database which is accessible on our website, so any public servant can go to the website, can access that, and they can see all the ideas there, the description of it, and they can see how they can apply that to develop their own stuff in the public service. We also have one for the customs. I say the phones, when you bring phones into the country, or any equipment and telecommunications, it has to be approved to work in St. Vincent. So before Apple sells iPhones in St. Vincent, we don't have to approve it to be sold in St. Vincent. So before, the process was you go to the customs to clear some equipment. They say, oh, you need a license from the NTRC to clearance. You got to leave, come to the NTRC, get a form, go back over there. It's a slow process. So we develop a database that is online, accessible by the customs officers. They can go into it and see which device is already approved. So if you bring in something, it's there. You don't need to come to us. They just approve it right away. So we save that time. And a lot of other ones like that already exist and everything we could change. We also develop an app for our own use, as well as for persons who want to find Wi-Fi spots. NTRC Connect app that was developed in-house by our own staff. And we just work with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. We just develop an app for them called Vinci Prices. The person can find the prices for commodities in the supermarkets. And those are locally developed persons within our office with our skills locally. So I think one of the main ways, I think why we're able to do so much in our small organization is being able to delegate. When we have star performers, I think civil service anyway, you tend to promote them upwards. But normally when they're below, they do everything themselves. When you promote them, then they still want to stick in that mindset of not delegating. They want to do everything themselves. But you can't manage an organization or department by doing everything yourself. You have to delegate stuff and responsibility. And I think that's one of the main areas that I have learned since working with the NTRC. I was the same, not want to delegate all up, but I've learned to do that, and I delegate as much as I could. So I empower the staff, and they do a lot of stuff. And the issue of delegating is something that has been around since biblical times, from the days of Moses, when Moses was leading the Israelites out of Egypt to the Promised Land. In Exodus 18, his father-in-law came to visit him, and he was seeing him spending all day judging, taking care of matters, complaints by everyone, and he was spending all day doing that. And he asked him what he is doing. He is burning himself out now, and the people have to wait all day. So he told them to select some capable people and appoint them to handle something of the smaller complaints now. So that's delegation. So some of the smaller tasks, you can let the staff do them. The big ones come up, and you can handle them. It's very important. And some of the policies we have at the NTRC that I think helps out with innovation and work ethic is that we're fair to all staff. We're very flexible with them. We don't want time off, we get time off. And we believe in training and personal development. We do spend a lot of money in training. That's very important to us, as the PM announced. And we have been blessed with having board members who see that same way. So anything for training, personal development, the board will help us on that. And we try to bring in as much young persons as possible to the organization. So I say back to the logo, the I-Square logo you see in there, that was developed by an intern from the community college, 19 years old. And she's currently in UE, Mona, studying medicine. So you empower them. It wasn't on outside of the NTRC. Right, so I'm going to wrap up now. Andrea, come, please, yes. So the secret, I think, to innovation is to read a lot in general areas and also to read about new technologies. With this knowledge, you will see how we can apply new technologies to current challenges and needs. Also be persistent enough to see things through when you are faced with challenges and naysayers. Thereafter, you see how you can make changes to save costs and improve efficiency and productivity. Also need to be able to convince staff of the changes need to be done. Sometimes they want to make a change, they're reluctant. So what I do sometimes is do a pilot stuff, say do it from 1 month, and then they see, they get the winning. You try it and say, I'll just do it for 1 month. If you like it, then you do the change. I have some recommendations for the public service here, but I will stop here. So Andrew, I want to hand over to the panel. Okay, thank you. Sorry for running over the time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Knights. And I know you have lots more that you would like to share with us, but we would really like to get into the panel discussion. And at this point, I am going to call on our moderator, Mr. Anthony Regisford, who happens to be the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, who happens to also be partnering with us at this event, as well as with the award ceremony that will be coming right afterwards. So I want to bring up Mr. Anthony Regisford, and he will take over from here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emma. And let me extend my greetings and welcome to all the senior public servants, especially invited guests, the media, everybody who's here. I feel a bit like a captain on an aircraft that is trying to make up time. We've already set out late, and I'm going to try to get you to your destination maybe on about the scheduled time that we plan to finish here today. So bear with us. The panel discussion is an open style discussion. We're going to have 5 panelists, I think. I'll introduce them. Some of the ground rules are that each panelist will speak for up to 10 minutes. And in our bid to make up time, if they don't utilize 10 minutes, we'll be happy. However, if they start to exceed the 10 minutes, you'll see me get up, and I'm going to be like a traffic police. I'm going to stop you. We're going to have, after their presentations, we're going to have a discussion among themselves. That was slated to be 35 minutes. I think we're going to cut that back again. I'm just telling you how I'm going to make up time, how I'm going to get some tailwind. So we're going to cut that back, and then we're going to have the open forum where you are going to ask your questions. So, without further ado, let me introduce my panel. And I myself have to make up time in what I'm doing here. So we have some bios, which I'm going to... This is yours? All right. A small podium. You okay? You all right? Okay, so our first panelist is Dr. Maniva Glasgow. She is a graduate of the Caribbean Union College, University of the West Indies, and the University of London. She's been serving as the Deputy Executive Director of the Simmons and Grendy's National Insurance Services since January 2001. Mrs. Glasgow is amply qualified. She holds a PhD in international business from the North Central University in Arizona. She's written several books. I'm not going to call all of them out. And currently, she is the Human Resource Management Practitioner. She is a Human Resource Management Practitioner with an innovative style of training. I welcome Dr. Maniva Glasgow and ask her to take her seat on the panel. Our second panelist is Mr. Bentley Brown. Mr. Bentley Brown is well known to us. He's a son of the soil. He is a development planner with over 25 years of experience as a public sector planner and as a consultant to various development agencies. He has a sound understanding of global issues and how they impact on international policy development. Very knowledgeable individual. He functioned for 5 years as the head of the EDF/PMCU office in St. Vincent, with overall responsibility for the programming management and coordination of the European Union Development Assistance. Mr. Brown, his portfolio as Director of Social and Sustainable Development entailed the development and implementation of regional policies, programs, projects, and initiatives in 9 member states of the Eastern Caribbean, with special focus on social and sustainable development. I ask Mr. Brown to come and join the panel. So while Mr. Brown comes up, our third panelist is Mr. Brian Glasgow, Chartered Accountant, specializing in corporate restructuring, and currently leads the KPMG practice in the Eastern Caribbean. Numerous qualifications, including being a Chartered Accountant and a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants in the Eastern Caribbean. He's a past president of the Chamber of Industry and Commerce. He's a member of the U.S. Bankruptcy Institute. He coordinates the judicial managers of British Americans throughout the Eastern Caribbean and is the appointed judicial manager in SVG and Montserrat. Mr. Brian Glasgow. Mr. Nathaniel Williams is our next panelist. As of today, 23rd June, he's an officially retired public servant. So we want to give him a special send-off today from his active duties as a public servant. I've had the privilege of serving with Mr. Williams on the Invest SVG board. Exceptionally knowledgeable individual, and he is a former director of trade and the first permanent secretary of the Public Service Ministry. 10 years, Mr. Williams was at the helm of his career, which ended as permanent secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So, Nato, as you're fondly known. Our fifth panelist, who possibly has the longest bio and insists that it must be shortened. So, very appropriate for the circumstances, Edmund. He's the budget director. The Prime Minister also alerted us that he's the acting Director of Finance, or Director General of Finance. Yeah, acting Director General. Mr. Jackson's been working in the public service for over 30 years. He's trained in finance and economics up to the master's degree level. Amply qualified guy, very knowledgeable, and is certainly going to give us some insight into this topic that we're going to discuss. Mr. Jackson. So while Mr. Jackson moves along, we would move right into the panel discussion. I'm going to say that. Yeah, that's me. Each panelist will come up, like I said, and give a up to 10-minute presentation. So I'm going to ask now Ms. Maniva Glasgow, Dr. Maniva Glasgow, to come and give her presentation on accelerating innovation in the public service, which is what we're discussing today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, permanent secretaries and heads of department, distinguished members of the panel, fellow public servants, members of the media, special invitees, and other invited guests. Ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant good morning to you. Let me thank you for inviting me to be a part of this panel discussion under the caption, How do we accelerate innovation in public service delivery in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? The theme suggests, and rightly so, that there are elements of innovation in public service delivery, but that you are seeking ways and means of spurring on this innovation by, among other things, benchmarking successful private sector and statutory organizations. I wish to establish a context for this discussion by advancing that innovation does not emerge in a vacuum, but to a large extent, it is influenced by the organizational environment in which it is created and implemented. Organizations differ widely, but there are certain common factors that underpin all organization types. These include, inter alia, the structure of the organization, the roles played by key individuals, the training and development of staff, the way in which work is organized, the extent to which people are involved in innovation, and how the organization itself goes about learning and sharing knowledge. At an organization, the public sector engages in constant interaction between departments and the various publics that it serves. Given this framework, there is always a significant role in trying to align the organization with its own reality. That is, trying to direct all members of staff to the reason for its existence and the role that they must play in ensuring business effectiveness and efficiency. And I must say that there's a difference between effectiveness and efficiency. Effectiveness is about doing the right things. Efficiency is about doing things right. Since we are addressing the how of accelerating innovation in public service delivery, then people must form a central part of the discussion. I refer to customers because customers are at the center, at the core of business success and the greatest source of competitive advantage. And if they are satisfied, then this will redound to the benefit of the public service in terms of greater productivity and greater service delivery. I am fully cognizant of the fact that customer satisfaction or variations of it has become one of the cliches of management presentations, mission statements, and annual reports throughout the world, along with concepts such as empowerment and team working. It expresses the view that people are at the heart of the organization. But very often, the people who you are trying to propel as the centerpiece become cynical, believing that this is the platitude, since the same organization that exposes and praises customer satisfaction still operates as if people were part of the problem rather than the solution. My discussion is geared towards changing that worldview, because in the field of innovation, customer satisfaction is of central importance, whether at the individual level or at the corporate level. Innovation is increasingly about teamwork and the creative combination of different disciplines and perspectives. Whether it is bringing a new computer concept to market or filing income tax returns electronically, success comes from people working together in high-performance teams. This effect, when multiplied across the whole spectrum of the public service, can yield surprising results. So from the perspective of the NIS, service innovation and the customer value would be an integral part of my discussion. If time permits, I will touch on process innovation and organizational and managerial innovation. As you would appreciate, the National Insurance Services is a statutory corporation. We have undergone significant cultural changes over the years of existence. The first change occurred in 1986, when the institution was changed from the National Provident Fund to the National Insurance Scheme. This was more than a change of name, because the whole modus operandi was changed, including the range of benefits offered, the level and extent of coverage, the management structure, the work processes, and the regulatory and legislative changes. Our service innovation at the NIS is born out in our values, which we have identified as: 1, to serve the Vincentian public with professionalism and efficiency; 2, to treat all persons fairly and with respect, openness, and honesty; 3, to constantly strive to satisfy customers' needs; 4, to act with integrity and diligence; 5, to remember that we are accountable to you, the persons whose funds we hold in trust; 6, to manifest the spirit of loyalty and friendship; and 7, to keep abreast with change and to respond with precision at all times. As a typical service organization, therefore, the NIS places considerable value on both its external and internal customers. For us at NIS, we believe that our employees are the greatest source of competitive advantage, and that's a fact, because you see, you could replicate systems, but you can't replicate people, and that is critical. So we try to ensure that our employees are satisfied. To ensure that this happens, we at the NIS emphasize best practices in human resources management principles and practices. So, organization learning is high on our agenda. So the NIS is dubbed as a learning organization. We always strive, therefore, to adapt to change and to ensure that our employees are on the cutting edge. We involve them. Participation is key. We involve our employees in our annual budgetary exercise and work plans, where all our managers, after interacting with the employees in their sections, bring an action plan with their goals, strategies, and metrics for their respective divisions. And we monitor continually for effectiveness and efficiency. Of course, we have to review and refine based on the changes that are taking place to ensure that our work program matches our strategic direction. Right. Sorry. Then we have training and development. Training and development. The next area I want to touch on is our external customers. What do we do for them? Now, we are a corporate, social, responsible organization. And we believe that if we are making any significant change, that we must interface with our stakeholders. This was done when we changed our name again from National Insurance Scheme to National Insurance Services. We bring them in yearly for Pension and Appreciation Day, and we hold occupational health and safety exercises to ensure that they are involved. We also have a suggestion box, so you can come over, drop in your suggestions so that we can know how we can better solve your interests. Then, we have decentralized our services. We now have a branch in Union Island. We have agency offices in Georgetown and Beckway so that we can meet with the people face to face to ensure that they don't have to spend money to come into Kingston to have their needs met. Then, we have developed a My NIS app so that to allow you, our insured customers, particularly the younger ones, the opportunity to have an idea of their projected pension, enable them to see the status of their benefit claims, perform a visual check to determine if their employers are paying their contribution. I want to stress this because we have too many employers who deduct contributions and fail to remit. In terms of process innovation, we have now introduced, well, we have names from 1994, but obviously that is not meeting our needs, and so we are in the process of doing our own customized system that is called Project Liberate, and that will definitely help us to give better service. Next point is Submit Plus, where the employers can submit their contributions electronically. And many of our employers are using that system. In terms of our management structure, the NIS has one of the best management structures in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We use a team approach. A team approach where everyone can contribute to what is happening in the organization. And this approach synchronizes with the view that teamwork and cooperation can propel productivity, and that the teamwork fosters a considerable amount of autonomy and lead to the performance of challenging tasks. In closing, I want to say that in terms of our service delivery, we have a full-fledged customer service and marketing division. So you can come to the NIS and you are given personalized service. We also have just introduced a risk manager because remember we are exposed to a lot of risk and we want to ensure that your funds are safe, and so we are taking every measure that we could to ensure that everything is properly accounted for. It's a journey. The road has not been easy, and everything could not have been achieved at once, so we are using an incremental approach. And I want to suggest to you today that as you try to accelerate innovation, that you use an incremental approach. Clarence, use an incremental approach. You can't do everything one time. Use an incremental approach to try to achieve your goals. There has been significant improvement, but there are still areas that need to be addressed in compliance, benefits, and even the marketing function. So we are now trying to meet our top 25 employers face to face, where we can individually discuss the whole concept of social security and show the employers how they can remain compliant. And for the employees, for you, many of you public servants, pay your NIS, but you don't know what you're paying for. Come over and check us. We are there to help you, and I'm suggesting to you that in those departments for the public service, where you interact with people consistently, bring them in. Deal with them on a one-to-one basis. Ask them for suggestions about how you can best fulfill their needs. If we do that, for sure, the NIS, well, we are sustainable, we will remain sustainable, and you too will remain sustainable and viable in the context of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Glasgow. I think she was very insightful in her brief presentation. She spoke about innovation not existing in a vacuum, and she went on, obviously, to use the NIS as a model entity that has created a culture for innovation, a learning organization, you call it, and highlighted, of course, that innovation, at the end of it, is all about customer service. So there's no point innovating and improving processes and so on if you're not taking the receiver into consideration, who is the customer. So this is what this whole discussion is all about, and Dr. Glasgow is very good at highlighting that. Our next panelist is Mr. Bentley Brown, and Bentley is guided by the same 10-minute rule. So, Bentley.
Good day all. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. With the protocol that's already established, I would, in the limited time, try to move into my presentation. I want to say I agree with a lot of what was said before by Mr. Knight and also from my schoolmate, Dr. Glasgow. So I will avoid repeating a lot of what was said, but basically to say I concur with most, if not all, of what those two persons would have said before. In the limited time available, I would avoid going into a lot of background details, but try to go straight towards the point, because I believe you have a good understanding of the social and economic context, and we are very much familiar with the history, size, characteristics, and functioning of our public service. In St. Vincent and the Grenadines, basically, I think as a society, we have a vision for the improvement of the quality of life for all Vincentians. And this is well expressed and articulated in our National Economic and Social Development Plan. Based on this plan, the public sector has a major role to play in national development. But it is not the public sector alone. The private sector, the civil society organization, and individuals, critical stakeholders, they too have crucial roles to play in the realization of the goals and objectives of the national plan. Public sector activities can be classified, in my opinion, in two broad ways. Firstly, we can look at those sovereign activities, which are the functions which only government can perform, like defense, foreign affairs, policy, development, regulation, etc. And we could refer to those as more or less the core services. And we also have non-core activities, which are services which government would undertake, sometimes by default, but which could be handled efficiently and effectively by third parties. Delivering service to citizens is at the heart of what most government agencies do. Services are therefore critical in shaping trust in and perception of the public sector. Today, citizens are expecting more transparent, accessible, and responsive services from the public sector. And these expectations are not static, but they are rising. We know recently the government would have made certain initiatives to try to improve service delivery through various strategies and intervention. But there's an increasing section of the population which is disgruntled, which has low customer satisfaction, and who quite rightly are asking questions related to the efficiency and effectiveness of the public service. Many citizens raise the question of whether the public sector is doing the right thing, which entails the delivery of services consistent with the needs and requirements of citizens. And secondly, if they are doing the things in a correct way, if they're doing it right, in that are they providing services of a high quality and at a low cost. As we embark on an exercise to look at the acceleration of innovation in the public service, we must ask ourselves some, if not all, of the following questions. To what extent the public programs meet stated goals? Are public services being delivered in a least cost manner for a given quantity and quality of services? Is access to public services being expanded with appropriate partnership or contractual relationship within and beyond government? What activities or programs should be outsourced in whole or in part to the private or voluntary sector? Are the public funds being put to their best use? As I focus more on the civil society and the regional experience, in the limited time I have, I will try to answer some of these questions that I've just raised, and secondly, to try to produce some recommendation suggestions. I would say that many of the public programs are not meeting their goals, and largely because we are planning for the citizens without actually engaging them in the process of planning. So that we do things and we assume we know what the clients or what the customers want, but in most cases we don't know. It is high time we let citizens tell us what matters most to them. We cannot feel that because we may have experts within the public service, we know everything. We need to consult people, and we need to develop and implement policies, programs, and projects with people. Experience has shown that when governments deliver services based on the needs of people they serve, they can increase public satisfaction and reduce costs. I think one of the major initiatives of the public service going forward is to carry out more citizen needs assessment surveys so that they could be in a position to know what the people need and to be able to prioritize needs and so develop policies, programs, and initiatives which would be responsive to citizens' needs. I'm therefore putting forward the case for development and implementation of a customer-centric approach to service delivery, design and delivery. Government agencies for far too long have been carrying out monitoring, evaluation, and other type of exercises. But they have been doing it and coming up with solutions based largely on their own assessment in-house. Very few customer services and performance evaluation have been done where stakeholder responses, stakeholder views have been incorporated. It would be very interesting if we were to look at how public sector agencies assess themselves in terms of performance, and to, on the other hand, juxtapose that with how the customers themselves feel with respect to the quality of services provided by public service organizations, agencies. Secondly, related to this point, I want to make the point that for too long, the government has been controlling information, and there's not been a free flow of information to assist community groups, the private sector, etc., with business development, etc. In most cases, a lot of general information that people need that could help them to empower themselves, to empower organizations, to help with community projects, programs, with private sector businesses, we find it is very difficult to get out of government sources. But today with the information technology, we see all that is changing because increasingly the public could go and access the internet, etc., and they could get information. And access to this information is more or less limiting the stranglehold the government had in previous years over people. And as Knights pointed out, the whole issue of the IT revolution is not only making it easier for government to send information out to the public, but it's also for the public to interact and also to be in a better position to assess government performance. So what I'm also proposing is that government and ministries do much more in terms of data collection and developing more liberal systems for which they would ensure the dissemination of data and information to citizens. I think we need to have more open and transparent policies so that customers know what institutions are doing, but also that the customers get a chance to get the kind of information they want out of institution. I think for too often we try to promote what is good, but we fail to let customers know the reality. We would make mistakes as humans, but the idea, I think, is not necessarily to hide the mistakes, but to let us be open and frank and show how we intend to improve on the mistakes that we would have made. Thirdly, I think we have to focus on the whole area of the role of government. I don't think government have to do all. There is space for other persons, agencies, civil society to do work. We could look at developing more partnerships with citizens, civil society, and also voluntary and community groups. I think if we go this route, we will gain a great deal of benefits. For example, the SIF experience has shown how we could, the SPG SIF experience would have shown how we could mobilize communities, empower communities to involve in their own development in terms of identifying needs and responding to felt needs. And most importantly, keeping costs low and being efficient and making sure that we have a lot of ownership of government programs. If we follow the route of involving NGOs, etc., I think we would see an increase in the supply of public goods and we could enhance the welfare of citizens. I think local projects and involving local people tend to ensure that the beneficiaries are satisfied with what they get, and more importantly, since they have a good understanding of the challenges and the local conditions, we could find ways of saving great costs and, more importantly, building social capital to sustain development. Similarly, we could look at partnership with the private sector, but since we have somebody from the private sector here, I won't go into a lot of that detail. Now, at the regional level, I think there are a lot of opportunities where we could maximize benefits. We have REDO, which is maybe the most efficient agency in the OECS in terms of accessing resources and being that link between national government and the OECS Commission. However, despite having REDO, what we find that the whole work of regional integration and some of the benefits we can get from the operation of the Commission and the integration process are not achieved because we have major challenges which we have not addressed and which we ought to address at the national public service level urgently. We have to try to integrate our development plans with the CARICOM and the OECS regional development plans. We have to try to utilize the potential for getting planned programs and also some of the available resources. We have to look at putting great attention on linking the national work plan and budget with some of what is going on at the regional level. And in this respect, the Ministry of Education in St. Vincent has been very effective in linking the education program with the OECS education program. The OECS have produced a lot of draft policies, sector plans, etc., but we have these documents, model legislation, and we are not using them. And while they may be 80% or 90% good, they are just shelved. And I think we could deal with a lot of the issues and problems that we face if we could turn to some of those documents for implementation. We could also learn and share the experiences among our member states, because the problems in the public service in St. Vincent are no different, and we have not used these potential projects and learning experiences to our best benefit. The whole issue of IT was mentioned before, and I think one of the big advantages when we see the regional organizations operating is how they have used IT to lower costs and to be efficient. I just want to end by saying we need to seriously look at the whole issue of courtesy and customer service and being polite. And in this respect, I think we could develop codes of conduct in which we could try to address issues of courtesy and adherence to codes, etc. In the closing, I just want to re-emphasize that public institutions should constantly strive towards improving their service delivery. Customer expectations do not stand still. The customer perceives and have real needs which they want to be addressed. They don't necessarily want more rules, new policies, and new regulations. Good governance and public participation is critical going forward. Let us don't try to guess what customers want. Let us ask them. Let us develop good attitudes to customer satisfaction. And most important of all, I want to leave you with this statement. Customer care is not about meeting expectations, but about exceeding them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Yet again, I hope our panelists don't feel that I'm pushing you along too fast, but I also understand, Emma, that the topic is a very meaty topic, and certainly they have done some preparation and want to get their points across. Mr. Brown, I think he spent a lot of time on customer service. He really brought that message home, and also about understanding customer needs, because if you are trying to serve somebody and you think that they want a rubber tire, but basically what they really need is a rim, then you may deliver that rubber tire very efficiently, but you've done the wrong thing. So understanding the needs, in customer service is very important, and Mr. Brown certainly brought that point across. He spoke about transparency, free flow of information, and that's also important. We're no longer living in an age where somebody's operating in some sort of tower that is, protected by all sorts of locks and doors, and they're serving people who don't know what's going on inside there. And that's not how we operate today. So the free flow of information, we can't stop that anyway. The internet, social media, all that has broken down a lot of these barriers. And the more we adapt to that and adapt to that, the better I think we would be. And that was one of Mr. Brown's points. And he spoke about best practices, learning what's going on in the rest of the region, sharing ideas, etc. And most importantly, some basic things about customer services, being courteous, being polite. Those are things that I don't know if they can be taught when you actually enter the public service. I think you should come there with those skills. Anyway, our next panelist is from the private sector, Mr. Brian Glasgow. He's going to Well, I don't know what he's going to do, actually, so let me ask him to come. I was going to say you're going to fly the public sector, the private sector flag, and see what it is like for us in the private sector as receivers of what the public service delivers. I hope you do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, distinguished audience, and fellow panelists. This is what 10 minutes looks like. In fact, I'll do it in 5. Now, we talk about the private sector and the public sector, but if you think about what's been happening over the past few years, you'd notice that there's a convergence. The private sector is becoming a lot like the public sector and vice versa. So we need to not think of ourselves as being on different parts of the equation. We need to think of ourselves as being within the same equation. Now, what is public service delivery? In the context of the public service, and more specifically, what does the private sector require from the public service? At a micro level, the public sector's traditional role is to provide a number of services, including education, tourism infrastructure, telecommunication support, and so on. In today's world, though, the public sector is required to perform its administrative and regulatory role and facilitate delivery. The public sector plays a critical role in regulating market forces, like what Mr. Apollo Knights was talking about. And as a result, there are now new paradigms in the role of the public sector, moving from simply being a provider of tangible services to delivering intangible services and intangible solutions. As a result, there is pressure on the public service to continuously innovate. The public sector must therefore focus on purposes and outcomes, engage with the private sector more meaningfully, operate with increased accountability, and we've been hearing a lot of that word recently, make more informed decisions, and implement risk management. At the same time, continually consider the capacity and capability of the public sector to deliver. In other words, our sector needs to develop an international framework in public sector governance in order to deliver what is required by the private sector. The public sector needs improved decision-making, information about the value of assets, identification of the cost of capital, highlighting critical policy areas, better quality information, and Bentley alluded to that, reducing the scope of selective policies, and improving long-term financial sustainability. In order to do this, the government finance reporting system must be transformed. Now, a lot of the parastatals have already achieved this, but within central government, we have an archaic cash-based accounting reporting system to which we have become accustomed. We need to move away from that system to a proper accrual-based system of public sector accounting. In this regard, just last year, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of the Caribbean, the World Bank, and other bodies brought together representatives from the region, including representatives from St. Vincent and the Grenadines to the Bahamas, where they discussed enhancements to public sector accounting and reporting, and to consider how to enhance collaboration between governments and the accountancy profession in order to improve public financial accounting and reporting within the region. The main focus of the event considered reforms aimed at adopting international public sector accounting standards. The abbreviation for that is IPSAS. And IPSAS are essentially a set of accounting standards issued for use by public sector entities around the world in the preparation of government financial statements. So far, there are only 2 countries in the Caribbean, in the entire Caribbean, that have adopted IPSAS. That, believe it or not, Anguilla, the smallest territory in the Eastern Caribbean, and Cayman. And both of these territories have benefited substantially in overall accountability and transparency. We now need to move towards the adoption of IPSAS in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. In discussion with Edmund Jackson, he assures me that the process is a work in process. In fact, he tells me that the government's financial statements for 2015 are in the process of being converted into an accrual-based reporting system to be discussed at cabinet level. So we are getting there. Well, he says it's a modified cash basis, which is an interim process, but at least we have started the process. At the private sector levels, we have adopted international financial accounting standards, and that supports the government. For example, when the private sector produces financial statements for income tax, we produce financial statements using international financial accounting standards. We need reciprocity, and it is now for the public sector to be accountable to the private sector and report to us on what you do with our tax money using proper, modern, and appropriate accounting standards. So while the public sector continues to prepare its annual budgets and government financial reporting using outdated cash reporting system, the private sector must demand the same level of transparency and accountability from the public sector that the public sector requires from us. We appreciate that government accounting reform is a work in progress, but we believe that the process must become more revolutionary and less evolutionary. The private sector requires greater accountability, and I'm talking about accountability not in the confined partisan political point of view, but in the wider context. And the public sector must develop the financial accounting infrastructure to provide it. And in closing, I will just, was that 10 minutes? In closing, I will just reiterate my view on behalf of the private sector that the ultimate innovative requirement from the private sector to the public service is to accelerate public service delivery and enhance transparency and accountability using modern financial reporting systems in government. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I'm not surprised with the slant of your presentation. You did a very good job in representing yourself as an eminent accountant, and certainly has urged the public sector to adopt international accounting standards. And Mr. Jackson is to come up and address us as a panelist as well. and maybe he will, if not in his address, but in the discussion part of the proceedings, talk about government moving from a cash-based accounting system to an accrual-based accounting system, which is essentially the underlying point that Mr. Glasgow emphasized. Our next panelist is Mr. Nathaniel Williams, who is now an ex-public servant as of today. So let's ask you to come up here and perform your last act, maybe straddling between public and now private citizen. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Registrar. Audience, may you oblige me to adopt the protocol as was established, and let me go straight into my presentation. I'll read a little, but I'll talk. Today is the first day of the rest of my life. Today, I am officially a retired civil servant. I have had a satisfying and fruitful career as a civil servant. I have given 35 years of my life to public service. Simply put, it has been rewarding and quite beneficial in multiple ways. To be honest to myself, I would argue that I have not really retired. I have simply graduated to public service at a higher level to serve citizens and not clients. Enough of that. Let me turn my attention to the topic before me. I rather like the phrase in the national theme, innovative, citizen-centered approach. I like that phrase, innovative, citizen-centered approach. In the national, that is also in the national theme, because it connotes a more conceptual narrative than an operational one. I am therefore somewhat under duress to focus on the operational rather than the conceptual, because in the panel discussion topic, it's more tending towards operational than the conceptual directive policy framework. So let me move quickly into what I want to say and time myself that I will be out of here before I receive a note from the moderator. Innovation. I would describe innovation as a purposive act or set of acts aimed at implementing model ideas. Notice ideas. I want to bring a thought to us, or to posit a thought which is quick. Many times, or in human endeavors, science and art are productive tools which are used, and not, in my view, I would say they are not innovations. Innovations are more of the intellectual property of the spirit of the individual, of the human. So they are productive tools which are used. Technologies, for example, I do not call them innovation. I call them productive tool. How we apply those productive tools in giving service, in delivering service, is what I want to focus on in the few minutes I have remaining. So let's move quickly. There are 6 innovations which I would like to raise, and I would draw one example from the public service for each of them for ease of reference and clarification. The first is called service product innovation. Service product, not service. Service product, because service speak more to a kind of output. Service product speak more to an output with a desired outcome, geared towards an environment or a target group with a desired outcome. So I use the term service product innovation. It is a new service or product or service product produced, or it's an improvement in the quality of an existing service product. A good example, universal education in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It was there before, but there was innovation in not only the product itself, but targeting and ensuring that there is a desired outcome. Whether the desired outcome has been achieved over time, I am not sure. But the way the product was designed and actually innovated is to ensure all Vincentians from all households receive education to become functionally literate citizens, not just learning for learning's sake. The second I want to look at is service delivery innovation. The service product innovation, in my view, is different than the service delivery innovation. And this is a new or altered way of delivering public service product. Good example. Customs and Excise have their Management Act. Port has their own, Customs have their Asecuda World. Port has their own system of operation. How we mesh them together to deliver, how we integrate to actually deliver service. Why should you go to the custom to clear good, come to trade to pay your license, go back to somebody else to pay the tax? There has to be a kind of integration of the systems and a proper interfacing. And that type of product is called product or service delivery innovation. The third, administrative and organizational innovation. This is where, within the organization itself, there must be some level of integration. I want to ask and argue, how could we have a civil service, which is the largest corporate body in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and the management of that do not meet regularly to set policies, objectives, and I say policies within administrative line? How could we do that? Administrative innovation is how within the confines of the organization we can make changes which are efficient and effective, and which not only output but become outcomes in that they have desired results. There are many things I could speak to on that issue. Government has passed a suite of legislation in 2015 for e-transaction. They are there, but have we put together that human spirit of innovation, of how we could apply them for the betterment of not clients, but citizens? I move to the other three quickly. The other three are not operational. The first three I look at are operational at the operative level. How does the front desk deal with matters? How does the back office support the front desk operation? But in the second tier of it, we have conceptual innovation. This is where the development of a new worldview that challenge status quo, assumptions that underpin existing service products. Notice the term I use, service products, processes, and organizational forms. Here is where it is more at the policy directive level. There needs to be innovation that would impact on the operational level. There's a worldview, for example, I want to use. Do we have a maximalist or minimalist government? The maximalists believe that they need to provide as much as possible resources in the hands of individuals for them to have a good life. The minimalists believe we need to allow the individual as much resources as possible. So the conservative in the United States is a minimalist. The Labour government in Britain is a maximalist. We are more tending in our governmental operation, conceptual innovation, towards a maximalist. Giving towards, I say, where we try to assist, have higher taxes, giving more service. That's a maximalist type approach. I have a lot of things to talk about in that area, but I will not. I move to the second of the higher innovation within that level. And this deals with policy innovation. Policy innovation is a change in the thought or behavioral intention associated with a policy belief. How policy instruments can be improved. Take, for example, the budgetary process. Government has done significant work in improving the budgetary process. They began consultation. There is what is known as NPM. That is the new public management rubric, under the new public management rubric, where the manner in which the budget is done implicitly cause innovation in the way the services are actually delivered, where we are no longer administrators, but we are much more managers. And that alone changed the concept and now bring a level of accountability. How could we have, and I want to repeat myself, a public service corporation so large and accountability of managers are not as rigid and as strict as it should be? That is why, and let me be honest, today is the last day, or today is the first day of my life as a non-public servant. That is why the public sector reform failed. You know why? Top managers do not want to hold themselves accountable. I have been the permanent secretary of the public service as my first job as a PS. Permanent secretaries and heads of department need to hold themselves accountable and have a peer group review, and then have the moral ground on which we could then evaluate subordinates. If we're not ready for that, innovation will not take. And the last one, I'll move very quickly. Last one, I move on quickly. As I said, today is systemic innovation. Systemic innovation, again, is more outside of the administrative. It is how does the government and its governance structure is established to ensure not only delivery of service, but an integrated approach by all institutions of state towards that. Let's draw a case in point quickly. This is it. We are talking about delivery of a service of education. Education is a conversation between generations. It's not going to school for instructions. That is only one part of education. In the broad context, it is a conversation between generations. So it's not only the Ministry of Education has responsibility for education. Community groups have responsibility for education. Families have responsibility. Other kind of what I call third sector institutions. And have we developed a systemic approach where not only, in fact, what we have done a lot is to outsource a lot of work that should be done by third sector institutions. We have outsourced them to the government. And that creates a bit of a problem. So let me close, because there's some other, oh, I'll be quick. I have three, yes, let me be very quick with these. Now, we therefore need to look at some things that impact on innovation. One, incentive structure. I draw the customs and other, let me not say customs, the revenue generating institutions, an incentive structure, and the impact it has on the manner in which they innovate. Some are positive, some are negatives, you would know. The negatives is where you don't meet the budget early, and at close to the end of the year, you want to meet your budget to receive incentive, and your method of dealing with the public and the citizen, not clients, the citizen, varies based on your, so therefore we have to ensure we have good incentive structure to create innovation. Public sector entrepreneur. I do not say entrepreneur, I say entrepreneurial spirit, because a civil servant should not be an entrepreneur in the operation, but they should have entrepreneurial spirit. It's not just complying with instruction. We cannot use Weberian view from Weber, where we have static bureaucracies. Bureaucracies, it must be different. And that entrepreneurial spirit of risk-taking must be positive within the operation. I don't have time for all of these. The bottom-up, top-down approach also have impact on innovation. If it's bottom-up, it allows he who is in the kitchen, who feels the heat, to guide the policy directive relative to the operation. As against he who is in the living room around the kitchen table, eating, may not feel the heat, and therefore bring new policies which may not be relevant and appropriate. Last of all, implications of consumerism. Margaret Thatcher says there is no society, there is only the economy, the government, and the people, individuals. I disagree strongly. And so we have moved with Thatcherism and Reaganomics into 3 sectors of society. 1, government. 2, economy. And 3, the individual. We have forgotten the 3rd sector, institution. If we begin to rethink the target groups to which we offer service products as not clients, but as citizens who maintain our very existence, it changes the manner in which we think. If someone comes from fancy, I would tell my staff in the past, wants some agricultural service but came to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, they are not wrong in coming there. They have come to the right place. Our job is to call the Ministry of Agriculture and say to them, I have X here who needs some agricultural services. Get the name of the officer in agriculture. Give it to the client or to the person and say, you can go there. No one is ever wrong. Consumerism has changed the manner in which we think. Chairman, sorry for taking this time. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Nathaniel. By me coming back to the podium, I'm bringing it back as a podium and I'm leaving Nathaniel, who consecrated it as a pulpit. He was preaching. So, very thought-provoking, very interesting. Nathaniel certainly brought out the whole concept of content versus delivery. He started out in a very philosophical thing about the spirit and all that of man. But yeah, with innovation, we really have to understand delivery mechanisms as opposed to content which drives expected or planned outcomes, which is what I think you were emphasizing on. Gave us 6 pillars of how we approach innovation and gave us some very good examples. I like to hear people talk about customs and immigration when it comes to public service delivery, because I think nested in there, especially customs, is a plethora of things that the private sector constantly engage and in battle with these institutions. I like how the theme of accountability is moving through the whole discussion so far. All the panelists have mentioned it. Mr. Glasgow spoke more from the financial perspective, and Nato, our recent panelist, spoke from the idea of responsibility and from the management perspective. Public servants not holding themselves accountable. This is something that we in the private sector, we know that it's easier for us to get fired, put it that way, okay? And we wonder if that's an impossible feat within the public sector. It's a serious question. It's because it talks about accountability. If you are ultimately not held accountable and don't pay the ultimate price, then where are we going? How can you seriously deliver a service? So we can innovate as much as we like, but if we don't, as Nathaniel identified, if we don't put those pillars in there, then we're wasting time. Anyway, I want to bring our final panelists to the podium, or the pulpit, if you're going to preach to. Our present budget director, and now acting Director General of Finance, Mr. Edmund Jackson.
All right, I'm going to keep my time and device here. Good morning, afternoon, everyone, fellow public servants. I have not yet seen or felt the spirit of liberation that my brother Nathaniel just expressed here at the podium. So, as a public servant, my presentation will probably be somewhat less liberating. Anyway, the topic this morning is a very interesting topic. And in my years at the Ministry of Finance, and been there for a while, I started there and I'm still there. Left briefly, went to the Treasury, right, Olga? Spent a few years there, learned a lot of stuff there. and now I'm back at the Ministry of Finance. I've been back since 1992, and I've been in my current position, I think, since 2003 or 2004, thereabouts. I noticed LinkedIn says I'm 15 years in this job. I think this is time for a change, right? I see the CPO laughing at me there. Anyway, so I'm going to go to this document. Everybody knows this document, right? Everybody seen it? It's called the National Economic and Social Development Plan, and Bentley would have referenced it briefly. I'm going to start by reading out under the planning matrix, and this is for you who want to go and look at it. It's on page 128 of the plan. It's in Appendix 1, and it's goal number 3. The goal number 3 says, promoting good governance and increasing the effectiveness of public administration. And objective 3.1, which addresses this directly, says to enhance participatory democracy, a theme that you heard coming through from Bentley a lot, accountability, which you heard from Brian a lot, transparency, effectiveness and efficiency, which you'd have heard from Dr. Glasgow, in the provision of public services. So I'll read it through. To enhance participatory democracy, accountability, transparency, effectiveness, and efficiency in the provision of public services. Now that's a mouthful, but I believe if as public servants, this theme or this broad statement should really inform our daily activities. I'll go on. So in support of this objective, there are some strategic objectives here. And every public servant really should be looking at this and to see where their role is and how this informs their jobs and what they need to bring to the policy table to provide better services to the citizens. It says here the first strategic intervention is improve the legislative framework governing public administration. Now immediately what comes to mind? The Public Service Act, the Public Service Regulations, the Civil Service Orders, etc., etc. Okay, the second point is strengthen the institutional capacity for monitoring and evaluation. Very, very important point, and I'm going to address this later on in the presentation. 2, encourage the public's participation in assessing the transparency, quality, and the reliability of services provided. I mean, it starts from the parliamentary level, coming through to the cabinet level, to the cohort of PSAs, all the way down through government, if you're thinking about making that type of assessment, all right? Modernized public relations communication system. I think they're talking about the PBX there. That's not a big innovation, but anyway. Improve private and public sector partnerships. Increase the use of ICT and e-government in delivery of services. So broadly speaking, for us as public servants in the design of our plans and programs, we must be guided by these imperatives, because this is what we spent a lot of time and money on doing consultations. We went abroad, we went to the diaspora, and we've developed this plan. It is embraced by the government and is referenced in the budget call that comes out. So that you are encouraged, and I'm speaking now directly to the public sector reform, because I know you guys have been struggling with mandates. Here's a mandate, right? I believe this is a mandate for the public sector reform unit. The outcomes from all of this, the objective, the strategic interventions and outcomes, is timely publication, dissemination of statistical and other public data. Bentley would have spoken to that issue. Increase confidence in the functions and undertakings of government, in the public, having that increased confidence. A highly productive and innovative public sector. That word again, highly productive and innovative public sector. And finally, improve operational standards and procedures. Here we go, standards. Brian, right? Within the public service. Now, this is to me a mouthful, and there's a lot in here that can inform the discussions today. So what I'm going to do, though, I'm going to use a practical approach, because I'm trying to stay true to the topic. And I suspect that the topic is asking us to identify what are some of the main drivers that need to be in place to allow the public sector to be more innovative in the design, and delivery of services to the public. So we've heard definitions of innovation. For me, it's basically finding ways to do things better. That's it, just finding ways to do things better. And generally the implementation of those new ideas. Now, innovations, and I think Brian mentioned it. I don't want him to fall asleep, so I'm going to call his name a lot. Brian mentioned it. He says in his winding up that we need to be more revolutionary than evolutionary. And innovations can be that way. So you can have evolutionary innovations, which are really continuous incremental improvements over time. And then you could have revolutionary innovations, which are more disruptive ideas, which change things overnight. So everybody knows about Uber, right? Back in the day, you go to New York, you have to hail a yellow cab. Now you pull up an app, and you order a taxi, you find out who's closest, and you could order a taxi just like that. Or you don't necessarily need to go call a hotel to book a hotel anymore. You can stay in a home somewhere, Airbnb. And all of these are applications, innovations that are disrupting traditional ways of doing business. So we can have similar innovations within the public service. So we'll come down to that in terms of how that can be done. So when we talk about public service delivery, however, we are talking about basically 4 elements. We are talking about access, and I think Nathaniel mentioned that, and I think Dr. Glasgow alluded to that about having regional offices. Access, how accessible are the services? Both in terms of geographic spread and how easily people can come to those services to find them. The second, and probably one of the most important, is the quality of the service. Does the service meet and beat expectations? Is it professional? Is it courteous? And the speed of the service. You know, how many steps do you have to go through to achieve the final outcome that you as a citizen, and I'm going to use that because not custom anymore, citizen, highest office in the land, right? As a citizen would like. And fourthly, cost. Now, I had a conversation with someone the other day, and if you look at our GDP statistics, our gross domestic product statistics, it has a sector in there called the public sector, right, as an economic sector. My argument is really, I ask this question, what does the public sector produce? It doesn't produce anything. The public sector is an insertion into the economic cycle, which adds cost to the economy. And if we are not careful, we can add so much cost that we can destabilize, or I could say crowd out the rest of the economy. So as a public sector, we must always be mindful of costs and try to deliver services at the minimum cost possible. Always. And I think not to, I have to steal that phrase about entrepreneurial bureaucracy, what do you call it? Bureaucratic entrepreneurialism or whatever, right? Something like that. There must be, and I think the Prime Minister uses 2 good words about this. He talks about prudence and enterprise. So that in our daily activities, in our plans, we must function as a business, but not as a business. All right? Now, when we issue the budget call every year, we ask persons to take a look at costs, at how you can reduce costs. We ask ministries to look at their programs, to review their programs, redesign them so that you can make them more efficient, you can make them more effective, at the same time reducing costs. Not many people do that. We ask ministries to provide us with a savings option, a what-if scenario. If we were to cut your budget, what sections of your programs you would like us to cut? A lot of people have a difficulty with that, a real big difficulty with that. Now, what that is asking you to do is to look inside and see what you are doing, how effective it is it meeting expectations? Is this something that we can do without because we have other compensating measures elsewhere? Or based upon this particular service, it is not as a high priority, it is not something that the public really needs, and we could then, if we have to produce something else, that we can, replace it by giving up on this. A lot of people don't do that. Now, that requires some innovative thinking. But it also requires a certain capacity in terms of your ability to do it. And I'll talk about that in a bit, all right? So keep me on the time check, right? I think I have about 2 minutes left. All right, so in order for us to improve service delivery through innovation, there needs to be several drivers in place. And I didn't count them, I didn't list them, but I didn't put numbers to them, but I'll talk about them first. Principally, I believe that we must have a supportive policy context. So the policy context must support the diffusion of innovative ideas and innovative thinking through the way policy is coined and approved. So we have a policy context here. However, I strongly believe that policy making to be innovative must be evidence-based. What is the rational basis for us making a particular policy proposal? Does the data support that? Do we have the data? Have we done the surveys? Bentley speak about the citizen assessments and so on. Have we done the consultations? Have we observed the data over the years? And have we done the analytical thinking? As the Prime Minister said this morning, have we used that most innovative computer ever made to do the analysis, to look at the data, to see what the data is saying, and then having conversations with the citizens to exactly ensure that we understand what the data is telling us and it coincides with what they are also saying and what they need. Evidence-based policy making, because far too often we start policy in the public service with legislation. You know, whenever we speak about policy in the public service, we first start with an act. We get a model legislation from somebody, and we say this is the policy. We start this as the policy. But what is the paper, the white paper, whatever color, that informed that piece of legislation? What is it trying to achieve? What is the objective? What is the outcome? And how was that supported by data? The second thing is, and I spoke about it a bit, touched on it, it must be citizen-centered. And I like the way Nathaniel put it, Nato, because people might know that his name is Nathaniel, it's Nato, right? He talked about changing the thinking, the paradigm in how we approach our work. We are here to serve the citizens. One of the practices that I've developed over the years in my own role as a public servant is, whenever I see an individual who is not an employee in the department with which I work, standing in the corridor or looking a bit lost, I make it my business to stop, introduce myself, ask them if I can help. Because sometimes that is what most people want. They don't really want to ask a question, they're not so sure, but they want some guidance. All right? We must always make it our business. And Nathaniel put it, our very existence is because of the existence of the citizens. It's not the other way around. You know, our reason for being is because of them. We are there to serve them. And I think if we focus our minds, from, even at the policy level, to be citizen-centered. All right, so that's in terms of the supportive policy context. I will tell you, based on my experience working with policy in the Ministry of Finance, the Cabinet, which is the executive body responsible for policy setting, has been broadly open and embracing of policy proposals that come to them from the Ministry of Finance, and broadly from many ministries, from my experience. So I believe that there is a propensity from the level of the policymakers to receive policy, distill it, and to make a decision. I believe what happens sometimes, we fail as public servants in our own duty to provide proper policy guidance. Sometimes, you know, in the public service, there's a document called a cabinet memorandum. Everybody is familiar with that document, right? This is the document upon which cabinet will make a policy decision. Always remember that. So when you prepare a cabinet memorandum for the consumption of the cabinet, bear in mind your audience, the information that you need to provide. You have to be quite clear, sometimes concise, because cabinet, you know, they consume a lot of information. You have to be concise, but at least be true to the essence of your proposal. Provide them the basis of your background, provide them your background assessment, the basis of your recommendation, and then you'll get the financial and economic implications, if there are legal implications, if there are other implications from ministries and so forth. All of that input goes, and then the cabinet will read this, they will deliberate it, they will discuss it, and they will decide. Now, the quality of a policy decision, you could finish the sentence for me, is based upon the quality of that cabinet paper. Whose responsibility is to prepare the cabinet paper? Is it the cabinet or the public servant? The public servant. So we must become better at articulating policy proposals and arguing them, and sometimes being, I wouldn't want to use the word crafty, but being persuasive. Learn to be persuasive, okay? Now, having done that, the responsibility rests with the cabinet to decide. Now, I know public servants who feel very aggrieved when their proposal is not approved, or put in so much work. No, that's not yours to do. Yours to do is to prepare and propose, do the best you can do in terms of proposing. The cabinet is there to decide. All right, because at the end of the day, I mean, as Nato said it, cabinet, in a sense, by its decisions, determines and shapes the philosophy of its government, all right, in terms of how it's interacting with citizens. Okay, so that's the first thing. It must have a supportive policy context. Secondly, we must have the relevant human resource capabilities. This is very important, because what I find generally, when we ask of ministries to do certain things, I don't think it is because they want to be delinquent. I think that the skills do not reside within the department. So for example, when I ask for a ministry to look at their programs and to review them, all right, you're talking here about monitoring and evaluation capabilities. Now, so that may not necessarily reside within the department. So they may not know how to begin that. As a matter of fact, they may not generally have a monitoring and evaluation philosophy or mechanism within their ministry at present. So how are they going to evaluate it and to review it? Because they're not collecting the data, they don't have objectives and outcomes which are measurable and so on and so forth. So, and they're not interacting with their client base, their customers and their citizens who they serve. So they don't have a basis upon which to do that. So that's part of the problem. We may not have the skills to do it. Now, in reviewing your processes, you need to learn how to do business process re-engineering. The skills may not be there. So you may be doing something, and we were looking at a couple of things in our ministry recently, and we're doing some things, and you have to ask your question, what value on every step in a transaction that you superintend over? You have to ask yourself, what is the value that this step adds to the process? Is it just adding cost, or is it adding value? So, but in order for you to do a business process re-engineering, you have to have the skill sets to do it, because it's a rational approach on how you do things. Okay? So secondly, or thirdly, we need to have the appropriate IT skills. And Apollo mentioned that a lot this morning in terms of a lot of the things that they were able to do in-house because of the resident IT skills that they have. So we must have the enabling HR capabilities, monitoring evaluation, BPR, business process re-engineering, ICT, and performance management. Now, I'll give you this example. Natana mentioned it about the budget reform and so on. We've been doing some budget reform for the last couple of years. And one of the biggest challenges we have is to get ministries to become output and outcomes focused rather than being input focused. I'll give you an example. A ministry will come to me and they say, okay, we need some additional funds. We need an extra 30,000, 50,000, 100,000. And I say, for what? Well, you know, we have this person and so on, we need to employ and so on and so forth. And I say, for what? You have to ask several for what questions until you get to the result. What I would like to see from ministries, from all of us as public servants, let us focus on the output. What are we delivering? Is it relevant, firstly? How do you know it's relevant? Provide me the basis. Those are the questions I would like answered. Then if we think it's relevant, then we say, okay, is somebody else providing it anywhere in the system? Because that's another big thing. Because we operate, and I heard George saying it just now, in silos, we don't always see what's happening elsewhere. And the public service is supposed to be an interconnected organization. It's a matrix organization which is supposed to be integrated. So that you may not necessarily have to have all of the resources under your control to get something done. You have to call on your colleagues across different ministries. And that goes to the question of being organizationally aware. Okay, so I have 6 minutes. Okay, thank you. I normally double. I'm getting there, I'm getting there. To be organizationally aware, to know what's available out there, all right? So moving on. Then of course, for innovation to take place in public service delivery, I'm gonna spend some time on this. We have to be, as I said earlier, citizen-centered in our orientation. And that takes in a whole gamut of things. From the level of accountability, reporting back. This is very, very important. And one of my biggest grievances as a pet peeves, I should say, as a public servant, has to do with the non-operation within Parliament of, to me, the principal accountability mechanism called the Public Accounts Committee. Now, this is not, I'm not trying to get into, the realm of politics, but it is there, it's a constitutional provision. It is a significant element in our public accountability framework. It is not functioning. For whatever reasons, I don't know. That's not for me to figure out. I'm just making the comment. So because this is how Parliament works, right? The government comes to Parliament and say, I have these plans. And these plans cost X, Y, Z dollars. The Parliament gives the authority through an appropriation bill to spend this money to deliver these plans. The government comes back the next year. Okay, I have these plans. I have this, I need this money. And the Parliament approves the budget. But without getting a sense as to, okay, so how did you do in those plans that you say you were doing, were you able to achieve? Now, we have found a middle ground. And we have these performance indicators and so on that's in the estimates, and we're trying to fine-tune them and so on. But that is that is really, there's no obligation on the part of a minister in presenting that performance. Really, okay? There's no obligation, right? All they need to do is to speak about the policy and the budget policy. There's no compulsion on their part to say, well, okay, well, we did this, and how much was, no. That really takes place and should take place within the confines of the Public Accounts Committee. Now, when the Public Accounts Committee does not function, it filters through the system. Because if the highest accountability body is not functioning, it filters through the system. So I'm not surprised that we do not have accountability within the public service. So we are trying now within budget to at least keep it within the public service. To say, okay, let's see how we can keep ourselves accountable. So we have refined our performance indicators somewhat to make them more quantitative, because before we had a lot of qualitative stuff. You know, people tell you the whole monthly staff meetings and the whole senior, no, that's not output focus. How does that benefit the citizens? I want to know what you are delivering for the money that you are spending. How is it adding value to the citizens? So we have been struggling with that because persons are struggling to change their mindset from thinking of getting money to delivering something for it. That's a big issue for me. So public consultations. A lot of ministries come to the budget table, and I'm going to reduce it to the budget table without first having consultations with their stakeholders. How can you plan for a sector that you're misinformed or uninformed about? So that's something. So the public consultations provide you useful feedback so that you can coin and craft policies and programs that directly benefit the people who you serve. So that's a major, major gap in how we prepare and plan and strategize that needs to be resolved. Secondly, I'm going to touch on the issue of data, because I heard several speakers talk about the provision of data. And this is absolutely important. Within the Ministry of Finance, we have made some commitments to provide, data on an ongoing cycle in terms of the fiscal accounts, which are published, procurement accounts that are published, procurement contracts that are awarded, and so on, to increase the level of transparency. But it needs to go much farther, almost said further. So the English teachers in here would know what I mean. So it has to go farther, all right? So right now, we are in the process, and next week coming up, we are part of a project funded by the DFID through the World Bank to begin what we call an open data readiness assessment. It's a concept that is recently introduced to the Caribbean, where the public sector is making commitments to make certain data sets available to the public in a machine-readable format that people can then utilize that information for various things in terms of businesses or different things of that nature. So we are in the process of doing that assessment. I think it is something that it is timely. I believe it's an area where we can improve, because we need to communicate more with the citizens about what is taking place within the public sector. It's their information, all right? Of course, there are some data sets which will be confidential for various reasons, and we'll identify those, and I suppose those will be carved out there. I know there was a Freedom of Information Act which was passed. I don't know the legal status of that, so I'm not going to comment on that. But that, to me, signals an intent, but I don't know how far we have gone in terms of presenting that. So lastly, in order for us to drive innovation in public service delivery, we have to promote a culture of innovation. And culture meaning basically behaviors. We have to promote behaviors that help to drive innovation. And we need to encourage those behaviors within the public service on a daily basis. And I know, I don't know if you guys are going to do it or if it is on the books. Recognition programs. I know you have an award thing going on now. It's a good little baby step. And I must commend you guys, though, with no budget, that you're able to pull this week off, all right? So I really must commend you guys. I really must commend you. CPO, I think you and your staff, you're doing a wonderful job. I would like to say here as a citizen that we love to see a bit more. So therefore, a proposal to fund Public Service Week 2018 would not necessarily be out of place. All right, so anyway, so to encourage behaviors, we must have recognition programs to incentivize behaviors. All right, we must mainstream, and this is a plug because Emma will get me a good meal on the weekend for this. We must mainstream public sector reform across whole of government, because I'm guilty. As budget director, we are doing some things in our ministry which we don't always invite public sector reform to be a part of. And I think that is very bad. It's something that needs to improve. It's one of the things that we need to improve. And I think across the public sector, there are many, many reforms taking place. A lot of reforms taking place. And there are a lot of bright spots, and I must applaud Apollo. I want to recognize the Immigrations Department and the registry as two bright spots, in my opinion, in terms of the work that they're doing. Applause now. Come on now. I pause for applause, but come on. All right. I really want to, because I believe that I've tested the services of the Immigration Department, and talking to colleagues from across the region, we have a model Immigration Department. All right? I believe we have a model in terms of how they deliver service, and the registry that supports that. The good old days are gone. No longer you could just send in and get a board paper. You know, you have to have proper documentation and so on. So I think things are improving. I must mention SIPO because I see Ms. Tony there, and I commend them. They're collecting a lot of revenue these days because they are, you know, implementing what they need to implement. One of the problems we have in the public sector, though, because for the private sector, we are doing a lot of computerization of systems. So we have e-tax, but you can't pay online. We can't pay online. We need to fix that. We are doing SIPO, but you can't pay online. You could do online registration, but you can't pay online. We are doing e-submit, but you can't pay online. Right? You know, I don't know. The online payment system, and so the bankers and so on in here, if there are anybody in here, we need to sort that out. It's a major stumbling block. I don't know what we need to do from an IT architecture standpoint, but I believe that is something that we definitely need to focus on as one innovation. And I like they convene. I think that is something we might have to talk to the Cabinet Secretary about, because they produce a lot of paper. And one of the problems with the Cabinet Secretariat is the inability to retrieve information swiftly. So that if you have a decision that's something that you're deliberating now, and you may have had previous documentation in it in a previous meeting, it is nigh impossible to retrieve that, unless the Cabinet Secretary would have gone through and found it. And that is difficult to do, because you have to go through files and minutes. And so we need to have, that's a simple innovation, all right? So I think I'm done. I think I said what I wanted to say. So just to recap briefly, I think that we need to have these drivers in place. And these are simple things, in my view, to do. So that in terms of our training policy, we're looking for these type of capabilities: monitoring, evaluation, business process reengineering, and IT training. You know, and IT not just, you know, just to get the degree, but to apply. So that these are skills that are very, very important. And general performance management filtering through the system. Just to make a plug, and Nathaniel said it, and it's something I've been saying for a long time. This is my final point. I believe that more innovation is possible in the public service, more collaboration, more cooperation in the public service, if the cohort of permanent secretaries meet as they should meet on a regular basis, possibly monthly, possibly quarterly, so that they can discuss, distill, and propose things as a group. Because, you know, doing things alone by yourself as a permanent secretary, and you may have an idea, and you bounce it off maybe your program heads, but if you have a wider audience of colleagues, you can share that with, you can present it with, you can refine it, you can distill it, we can have better things going forward. So the cabinet, which is the board, if you want to call it that, meets every week. The permanent secretaries who support those ministers do not meet. We need to fix that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Edmund. And that was a good 10 minutes. Edmund, I was sitting in front of you when you were talking about coming up to be a panelist, and I remember you saying 10 minutes is a long time to be talking for. Okay. I'll say no more. That's okay. Now we've come to the end. Mr. Jackson, I think, aptly brought up the National Economic and Development Plan to remind us that there is a guide, and a lot of work has been put into that, for which the public service is meant to be delivering on that plan. And then he went on to talk about well, what he calls the drivers of innovation, supportive policy, context, which he mentioned. If it doesn't start at the top, the politicians make the policy, and if the innovation and the policies that they come up with does not drive innovation, then we are the non-starter. Innovation being citizen-centered, talk about having the HR capability, IT skills, and one very important thing, not that what he said previously that was not important, but this culture of innovation. Certainly, and I'm not going to give out my age here, but when I was a kid, single digit, I came up in a culture where children must be seen and not heard. Some of us in here in the room could identify with that, and how much of us that exist within the public service, especially at a senior level, are of that mindset? I don't know, but we need to shatter that. And he spoke about disruptive ideas, Uber, and I think a big one is Amazon, to be honest with you. Take Amazon for granted now, but Amazon is creating a lot of havoc within our own private sector, and people who are merchants and occupy brick and mortar places and complain how business is rough, It's a changing world, and people are innovating and delivering service and being rewarded as a result. Now, I am going to do something, it's not innovative, but I'm just going to take a bit of liberty in removing the crosstalk session that we were meant to have here, which was slated for 35 minutes. A sort of inter-discourse between the panel, and we'll go straight into the questions from the audience. Let me just say that we've heard from the panelists, 5 of them. We do not want any more panelists, so I want questions, please. Okay? We've had the presentations, and let's adhere to that rule. Let's just have questions. Your comments and your ideas we can share after we formally break up. Okay? So, is there a floating mic? Well, we have one here. So, who's going to move around the floating mic? Let me just get that in order before we... Right, so we're inviting questions. You stand, state your name, and go straight into your question, and we will answer them. We'll ask the panelists to comment straight away, to provide an answer straight away. We're not going to collect the questions. We're going to answer each in turn, okay? So, first question from, well, you'll state your name.
Good day, everybody. Winston George, Ministry of Agriculture. And basically, there are 2 questions. One is for the panel, and the other one is for the organizers. And I did not hear it come up, but I believe it's integral. And I'm going to ask, how important is leadership to the whole process of innovation, right? And in terms of, for the organizers, are we going to get a copy of the proceedings of this forum?
Thank you. So we are being asked about the importance of leadership to the process of innovation. I don't know which of the panelists want to take. There's a mic on the table. Oh, you have one there too. Right. Which of the panelists want to go with that? The importance of leadership.
Well, actually, the leader is the person with the vision. And as the person with the vision who should guide the operations, the leader has to play a very important role. As a matter of fact, it should cascade from the leader down to the subordinates. So leadership is an integral part of any effort to innovate. I hope I answered your question.
You satisfied with that answer?
A matter of fact, I had to do the presentation, but in the interest of time, I had to leave it out.
Yeah, go quickly.
I'm actually driving at something. The leadership versus management act, because people tend to be managers. Managers seek to maintain what is, right? Managers seek to maintain what is, but leaders seek to develop and have a long-term vision. So that is in the context. I agree with what you're saying, but that is in the context, the context I wanted to actually bring.
Now to you had a comment?
Yes, I was going to say that Dr. Duncan at the UWI said Compton failed miserably because while he may have been a good leader while he's there were no transitional leaders coming from him. I just quote him. He's basically saying that. And leadership have a transitional role to play, not only in managing for the current, but managing for the ultimate, and allowing delegation. Because what we do find, like, I'm free to speak, right, Edmund? Yes. Speak. Okay. There is a problem in the public service now. When seniors move off, there's a, should I use the word dirt, or a lack of leadership at the middle managers, because a lot of managers fail to share leadership in a delegated way. And it creates a problem in terms of promotion.
So does this raise a question of training? Because if you're doing proper training of managers and so on within the public service, I think things like delegation and these sort of things that you're talking about are part and parcel of the whole thing.
Let me just make a point, because I actually had it in my presentation, but you see I had to cut because of time. But I actually had in my presentation the whole aspect of leadership and succession planning. Because I went to a seminar some time ago, and the man was talking, the presenter was speaking about the succession planning. And at NIS, that is one of the things that we practice, succession planning, because many leaders, either because of fear or being threatened, see a successor as a threat. And so many of them fail to develop leaders, and that is the problem now we're having. I'm not in central public service. In the public service, where a lot of the PSs and so are going, and you have to be scrambling for persons to fill the position, all because somebody failed to train other persons to take over after they're gone. But the truth is, if we believe in continuity and sustainability, we must train persons to take over after, and any good leader will encourage participation and delegation, recognizing that somebody, if you drop dead to the God forbid, somebody must take up the mantle and run with it. So if you keep everything, if you hug up everything, how do you expect the other persons to develop and go? So a part of good leadership is training your successor. There's a difference between leadership and management. Management is the one to, like, well, I call it plot, the cocoa, plan, organize, and direct, and so forth. But the leader must have a compelling vision that will propel the organization.
So there's a saying about indispensability, people who do not want to pass on because they want to make themselves indispensable. And somebody says all the indispensable people end up in the cemetery. So there are a lot of indispensable people in the cemetery, if you know what I mean. There was a second question before you come in, Apollo. Are they going to get a copy of the proceedings? That was the second question. To the organizers, a copy. And I imagine this is another thing where you can put online so that everybody can access it, rather than the idea of producing, tons of copies.
To quickly answer, we are compiling the information. We're going to get the presentations as well, and we'll compile. We intend to write a report on this, but we'll disseminate to the various ministries and departments, and as well we put it on the government website.
Good. We're coming to you. Apollo has the mic. Keep your thought there. Apollo?
Yes, thank you. My name is Apollo Knight from the NTRC. I have two questions. And we targeted, I believe, to Edmund, since it was the civil service now. Is there a department currently in the civil service that has a responsibility for innovation? That's the first question.
You want me to answer right away?
No, let's take a second question
one,
and then.
Right. The second one. Right. The second one, I'm not sure. Is there a performance system now in the civil service for? No, performance system could have a lot of different things in it. That cater for rewarding top performing employees now.
A recognition and reward mechanism you're talking
right,
about.
because like for the private sector, some of the statutory bodies, they have their own performance systems that they rewards to them, people who perform well. I'm wondering if the civil service has such a system then for that, so for persons who perform well.
I can give you 2 quick answers.
Right.
So Edwin, you're taking more questions.
I'll take, I believe that the first question, I believe, if I understand you correctly, is whether or not there's a department responsible to drive innovation in the public sector. I say yes, the public sector reform. In the economy?
Right, so that's the public service.
So within central government?
Right. Huh?
Within central government?
Central government, we want.
Yes, the public sector reform unit. That's the organization with responsibility. That's why it's reform. Maybe we need to rename it. But it's the responsibility of that unit is to facilitate the modernization of the public service. Whether it is institutionally resourced to do so, that's another question, but that's the organization really. Also, what I would like to say, because for me, I think reform should be really mainstreamed within every organization. Every leader within an organization should be thinking with the eye on innovating, doing better in terms of delivering what they're doing. So for me, that's how I focus my work. Because, you know, to just go back to George, transactional and transformational leadership, they're 2 different things. And an organization can only innovate if there is a leader with an eye on transformation. So anyway, so the second question was?
Recognition and reward.
Recognition? Well, no.
And
that's
reward.
a short answer. I could elaborate, but it's no.
Boy, we had somebody just ahead of you, please, yeah. We'll come back to you shortly after.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Janelle Drayton. I'm from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. My question really just has to do with sort of a part onto what Mr. George asked earlier about leadership in innovation. Because, okay, as a young person in the public service, I can say that when you think about innovation, the idea is that you try to find ways of doing things differently than how it's always been done, better ways. It doesn't always have to be different, just sometimes slightly, better in order to get a better outcome. And oftentimes you get, that we do this because it's always been done this way. So if leaders, I'm talking about leaders, not just managers, but if leaders don't facilitate within the unit, within each of their departments, the ability for staff to actually feel free enough, liberated, to come up with something that's different and actually create a space where that won't be punished, then you won't ever get innovation, because a lot of persons in the public service basically do what they need to do so that they stay out of trouble. They do what needs to be done to check the T's, dot the I's, and you move to your next task. And my question is, there are different types of management. So for example, there's public sector, new public sector management, new public management, which is practiced in a lot of other countries internationally. And based on what Mr. Knight said, they create a space for sort of pilot programs within units where you can have maybe a space of 3 months, you can put forward a query, you can put forward a suggestion to your manager, and they give you a period of time to come up with a concept, work on it, see if it will work. And if it doesn't work, if it fails, the manager acknowledges that, okay, that didn't work, we can try something else, and you're able to do this without the sort of punishment penalty that comes with if you fail something in public service here. And I'm wondering, is there any space within our public service, within our government sort of political system, which we know exists, for this type of system to be created to facilitate that?
So who's going to take that question? I guess she's addressing the whole idea of facilitating innovation. Do we have that space within the public service?
It's difficult to answer because as a whole of government, I don't know of such a space. Now within ministries and within departments, there are spaces, and it is really dependent upon the leader in each of those units. So to answer the question is a yes or no. Whether it is across government, no, I haven't seen it, I don't know of it. But within ministries and departments, yes. And you could see that from where I sit, I could make that assessment as to who is a transformational leader and who is a transactional leader, based on the proposals that I see, the ideas that are discussed, and so on, and the things that come forward. So I'm not sure, if that answers the question, but I strongly want to urge that for all of us who have responsibilities in our various units, that we begin thinking of ways and opening our minds and encouraging the staff to come up with ways